Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we mark today, day 480, since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel on October 7th of 2023, the situation remains volatile. There is ceasefire currently in the Gaza Strip, one in Lebanon, but nonetheless, the war vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic of Iran on a number of additional fronts is still ongoing. And for that, I'd like to start with our guests today in the studio, the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish. It's a pleasure, as always. I'd like to start with a surprising event. Not really surprising, because we know that the Iranians are all the time trying to harm Israel and to gain the advantage over Israel in this war, but nonetheless, two soldiers were apprehended by the Israeli security agency Shin Bet, during the course of which they were put in the spotlight over their activities for Iranian intelligence to try and film and capture classified details about Israel's Iron Dome system, the system that you integrated into the IDF. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree should we be concerned about those developments?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, it's great to be here in the studio next to you, and on civilian uniform. So I call it uniform, but it's my civilian clothes. We talked about it all along the last year. We are in a war with Iran. And this is one angle or one perspective of this war. There is the kinetic war, there is the war through the proxies, but there is also an intelligence war, there is a cyber war, there is a cybernetic war. All the dimensions of the war are being there during this fight with the Iranians. So they are trying to arm Israel in any way that they could find. Unfortunately, there are some Israelis that bought into it for all kind of reasons. In this case, we know that it was for money. Of course, these people have to be treated accordingly. The Iranians are trying to find our vulnerabilities. They want to learn about our systems, about our capabilities. Of course, the Iron Dome, which is one of the main systems for the defense of Israel, at least against rockets from the short range. And this is what they're doing. So another angle of this war, of course, we are doing everything that we can do in order to tackle it. The Israeli Shin Bet is on it, the Mossad, other organizations. We see that we caught them, but it also says that we have to be very cautious in our behavior within the IDF and overall, because they are there.
Absolutely. Well, for that, let's turn now to Central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofin, formerly the Chief of the Intelligence Directorate at the Mossad Intelligence Agency, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to immediately also ask you to follow up on this specific topic. The Iranians have been quite active when we're talking about trying to gain the upper hand, again, as I mentioned, with utilizing social media, Telegram in particular, but also other types of social media to try and buy people to do their dirty work in Israel, so to speak.
It's not only using that mechanism to recruit people from Israel, but nevertheless, it tried to target people that senior people that used to serve in the armed forces and other organizations, and to try to tempt them in some way or to drag them to get out of the country to some other places, and maybe to try to to meet them in a way, and try to make something which is not very pleasant to these people. But bear in mind that about a year ago, it was exposed that they tried to assassinate the former Chief of General Staff, General Yalon, in Israel. So they are very active. They use all the capabilities and all the methodologies they have in order to recruit people to, first of all, to carry out dirty works, meaning like writing slogans on the wall and espionage and other things. And on the other hand, they recruit people to try to assassinate people inside Israel, and we witnessed some cases before. So I believe that this war is becoming more and more aggressive, since they understand that their capabilities now to attack Israel with kinetic weapon systems are limited. They're applying this kind of war and trying to cause damage to Israel on that dimension as well.
Let's now turn to northern Israel, where we're joined by Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, formerly the commander of the Israeli Defense Colleges here in Israel, as well as an Army Corps commander. It's always a pleasure to have you, General, and I'd like to immediately ask your perspective to the ongoing rivalry and animosity between Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Ayatollah regime remains keen on confronting Israel. It understands the new rules of the game, so to speak, within the era of the Trump administration, which is not going to sit idly by if it continues its belligerence. But nonetheless, the Iranians understand also full well that by doing nothing, they will lose their footprint in many of the countries where they've been prior. And therefore, are we expected to see them doubling down on the various activities, particularly also via Hashd Shabi in Iraq, particularly their proxies there, but also Ansar Allah or the Houthi tribe in Yemen?
Before just coming to speak about the details, I want to read here some words of Khamenei that he declared them 2 months ago. Of course, he is influencing Qasem Soleimani. It is very important to learn the last speech of not Qasem Soleimani, of Naim Qasem, the chairman of Hezbollah today, from yesterday. And what Khamenei said, he said it like that: the resistant front, it means al-Muqawma, isn't a piece of hardware that can be destroyed. Resistance is a faith. It is a firm, heartfelt, a commitment. Resistance is a doctrine. It isn't a contractual agreement. Not only it doesn't weaken under pressure, it also becomes stronger. This is the idea of al-Muqawma. They are permanently dedicated to this idea. Of course, as I said, and repeating that again and again, it was wrong to translate the concept of al-Muqawma to resistance. It is not at all resistance. It is not the resistance in France that at the moment they fulfill their missions, they came back to normal life. The idea of al-Muqawma, it means permanent struggle and transformation of struggle. At the moment, it is coming to find difficulties in specific circumstances. They are creating a new form of a new line of a permanent new struggle. By that, they will check always what are the new opportunities, and they will never give up.
Very interesting indeed. Well, General Gavish, as General Cohen mentioned, yesterday we heard the Secretary General of the Iranian proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, namely Naim Qasem, who, with the backdrop of a picture just behind his shoulder of Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed during this war that took place post April 26th, which of course included the Beeper attacks and the subsequent attacks that really crippled Hezbollah. And today we see also their operatives, at least those who remain and used to be low officers, so to speak, and now are senior officers because all those above them were killed. They understand that they made a mistake when entering into this war against Israel. Nonetheless, they need to maneuver in a very tough environment right now for them, and a hostile environment, if I may add, to try and consolidate some sort of power, particularly in South Lebanon, but also in the surrounding areas of the Dahya neighborhood, which is the predominant Shiite neighborhood of Beirut. And it seems like they're failing time and again to really establish the parameters based on their own aspirations and that of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is the situation really that bad for this organization?
Well, Jonathan, allow me just to follow up on what was said by Major General Cohen, because he's super right. And of course, the question is, what is the lesson learned out of it? And I think what happened of 7th in October opened our all eyes, that we understand that this is real our enemies. If we had all kind of thoughts, well, we think differently today. And what it means is that we understand that it's a continuous struggle. We have to keep their heads down, and we have to fight against their capabilities, not to wait for their tensions, to allow them to have all kind of capabilities. And this is right against Iran, and this is right against all our enemies in this region. And I think that Israel changed its strategy, and I don't think that we are going to continuously contain the situation as it was before 7th of October. And I think this is the major lesson learned from what was mentioned by General Cohen. Going back to the Hezbollah, for sure, the Hezbollah now is probably in one of his weakest points in the last few decades. It is the situation, of course, after the fight with Israel. By the way, they said the same on 2006. In 2006, Hezbollah leader back then, Nasrallah, said that if he knew that this is what would happen, he wouldn't start this war. So if he was alive, probably he would say the same this time. Only that this time they were struck by Israel even harder than in 2006. So this is from the military point of view. But I think that what is really different from where we are now, if we compare it to 2006, is what is happening around the Hezbollah. Is what is happening in Syria. Syria is not there anymore for the Hezbollah. The Hezbollah has been weakened within Lebanon. So they are weak from a strategic point of view. They are weak within Lebanon, but they are still there with the mukawama idea. So we have to keep fighting them, and we can't allow them to restore their power.
General Sofin, I'd like to ask you, when we're talking about the restoration of power, the reinvigoration or the rearming of the various terrorist groups, with chief focus on Hezbollah, now that the Assad regime has fallen and the Iranians have lost their foothold in Syria, what is the prospect of Hezbollah rearming itself and again coming back to that dominant position that they were prior to entering the war on October 8th?
I think it is more complicated right now for them to try to rearm themselves because of two main reasons. The first one, you mentioned that Syria is no longer what we call a foothold. That can be what we call an area where they can deliver weapon systems coming out from Iran via Iraq and Syria into Lebanon, just like they did before. Second, they can't land aircraft carrying out weapon systems in Damascus like they used to do before, and to bring it into Lebanon. That means that Hezbollah is quite isolated on that item, on that dimension. And add to that the fact that Israel is controlling the airspace and, of course, the naval movements, and it is denying any attempt of ships or vessels or aircraft to come and land in Beirut and bring weapon system to Hezbollah or the port of Beirut. That means that Hezbollah doesn't have any sources now to rearm itself, except from what it has, its own arsenal that is left after being struck by Israel during this war, but nevertheless, they still have some capacities, and these capacities are all the assets they have right now. They have to recruit people, they have to train them, they have to turn them to be fighters, and of course, they are now more weakened in Lebanon than they used to be before because of the fact that a new president was elected, not somebody they preferred, not the man that they wanted. And just bear in mind that before this war broke out, Nasrallah denied for more than a year and a half to elect a president that is not favored by Hezbollah, and now they elected a president which is not somebody who was preferred by Hezbollah, and the fact that he is supported by the Western countries and Saudi Arabia that got into the vacuum that was left by Iran, and now they are supporting the new president and the new regime inside Lebanon, give them more strength to tackle Hezbollah and to push him aside and to bring him back to what he used to be before 20 years ago, some what to call some smaller and let's say more neglected organization that doesn't really have capacity right now to launch a war against Israel and to threaten Israel, at least for the coming years.
Well, we can, of course, hope and pray and be proactive in our activities to ensure that this war does not escalate once again. And if it does, to ensure that Hezbollah will never again raise its head the way it was able to do for so many years. But General Cohen, I'd like to ask another point, since on the one hand, Israel is successfully blocking the air carriers, trying to transfer funds and munitions into the hold of Hezbollah in Lebanon, alongside the various maritime routes in this context. But we have also another Iranian proxy, namely Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, coming out and saying that we will abide by the terms of the ceasefire in Gaza. We will not attack any maritime routes or Israel proper, all the while saying also that watch out, if something happens in Lebanon, we're going to react again in Yemen. This is something that is, of course, unacceptable for Israel, the United States, or the international community at large, when we're talking about freedom of navigation in the strategic strait of Bab el-Mandab, the various adjacent waterways from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. But nonetheless, what can be done in order to ensure that the various maritime commercial ships that are right now going through the Cape of Hope instead of the Red Sea can once again receive the assurances that it will be safe for them to transit those strategic waterways?
There are just two options. One, that the Saudi Arabic took for themselves to pay protection money to the Houthi. This was the way they succeeded to create a stability between themselves. I'm not really finding that option possible to United States or to Israel. It means the other option is to destroy the Houthi. This is not really easy. It will not be achieved only by air bombing. They are well protected in the underground, in the caves, in the mountains. It means that we must send, as I said in the past, expeditionary land forces, and I don't see the Americans going to that adventure, or, of course, Israel cannot do that. So anyhow, that specific point of strategic navigation channel is still blocked by the Houthi, and it is a great declaration of warfare against all the world.
Indeed. Well, they continue to hold an arsenal that they have received from the Islamic Republic of Iran. The RGC Quds Force is quite active in Yemen, and not only them, but we see also additional collaborative engagements, also from the Chinese aspect to a certain degree, albeit somewhat less dominant as the Russian involvement there. Can the United States and its allies, we see the various task forces from Task Force 153 all the way to the operation or the joint operation by the United Kingdom and the United States against the various targets in Yemen. Can we see some sort of a broader coalition really tackle this as a united international front against the belligerents of the Houthis and, first and foremost, as you always say, General Gavish, the Iranians?
Well, Jonathan, this is probably what we all need. We need a coalition led by the United States, because this would be probably the only effective way to fight them. We have to remember that military is only one angle of the fighting. There is the economical one, and there are some other ways to pressure the Houthis and those around them. So if it would be a decision that the Houthi is a problem that we are going as the international community to focus on them, led by the United States, we need a coalition, we need all kind of different means in order to fight this situation. Probably this would be the only way. Of course, from Israel perspective, the most challenging, I would say, threat coming out of them are the ballistic missiles and those UAVs. This is a capability that we would like to make sure that they won't hold it. How it would happen, of course, future would say. But in general, your question was right in spot. This is what we need. We need a coalition led by the United States. And of course, it goes back to the United States strategy for this region. You also rightly mentioned that China is part of what is going on in our region, and also the Russians, which is number one interest for the United States. So we'll see how the new government is going to design its strategy toward our region. And of course, the Houthis, but mainly the Iranians, should be a major part of it.
We don't have very much time left, but nonetheless, the Syrian file is still quite fluid, particularly since, on the one hand, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that took over Damascus at the behest or the assistance of the Turkish proxy Jaish al-Watani, as well as the Turks and the Qataris in the backdrop, fueling the political backing that is necessary to make this move. Nonetheless, now before the Europeans and the Americans received the prerequisites that they want to see in Syria, we're seeing the European Union coming out and saying, okay, we're going to lift sanctions. We're going to give you away all the leverage that we have over you with options to put it back. But we all know that what's temporary ultimately turns into permanent. And therefore, General Sofin, what needs to be done in order to express to the Europeans clearly that they cannot move ahead in trying to reconstruct Syria before the minorities, the Christians, the Druze, the Alawites, and the other Kurds and others will receive the guarantees necessary to enshrine them within a future reality of Syria?
I think the message that should be delivered to the Western countries and the Europeans especially is, first of all, you have to understand that this regime is not something that is very pure and very prosperous. It is kind of the terrorists that wore suits and ties and look like very honorable men, and some kind of spirit of change. And the fact that President Bashar al-Assad is out of this country and the Iranians went together with him and the Russians are living as well, gives some hope that something is going to be changed in the Middle East according to this situation. But nevertheless, they have to understand that this should be examined very, very specifically and with very open eye to look for and to see what aims do this regime has, to look forward and to look and to try to understand where he's aiming for, what is his plans, what are his plans. Is he going to pay back to all these people that are not, or what you call minorities, including the Alawites as well, of course, because they ruled Syria for many years and they caused a lot of damage to the Sunnis in Syria. And therefore, they must take very precautious movements and to take it very easy and to go step by step. And only when they look and understand that things are going back to what they used to be and what they're aiming for, only then you can begin releasing and lifting some of the sanctions and so on, but very easy and very surely, and not at once on one step that will bring them the ability to carry on and to do whatever they like.
So if they don't do that, General Cohen, will that mean war in Syria and a reinvigoration or new sparking of hostilities between all sectarian factions within Syria proper?
Not necessarily war, but absolutely instability. Actually, Syria is under radical uncertainty. Nobody can really predict what we will find there in the next year. Well, will be Julani himself, and all the wishes and expectations of the Europeans are just based upon that illusion that every story must come to a kind of happy end. And they are trying to believe that after the collapse of Assad regime, we are really facing a happy end. It is not at all far away from that. What it means for Israel, Israel must project not only power, but also humanitarian aid to the districts that are close to the Israeli border in order to prevent entrenchment of radical Islamic threats from that district, and it is necessary for the stability of the whole region, including Jordan.
Absolutely. Jordan, Iraq, even Israel and Lebanon, to say the least. But in one sentence, General Gavish, Israel is prepared for whatever happens in Syria.
In one sentence, Israel is prepared, and the second sentence, just to remind all of us that the hostages are still in the Gaza.
Absolutely.
And we did see some of them here in Israel, and we're looking forward to see the rest of them.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofin, Major General in Reserve, Gershon Cohen, and Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish, and to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.